combating PTSD. Before we go any further, I want to dedicate this show to the Focus Marines Foundation. They are located in Augusta, Missouri, nestled back in the beautiful hills back there. The Focus Marines Foundation is an incredible organization. They were created in 2010. They are there to help combat Marines get free from the damage done to them by war. They have a program that goes from Saturday to Saturday. If you live out of state, they will supply free round-trip flight. And they help you deal with anxiety, depression, addiction, insomnia, feelings of isolation, negativity, and self-doubt. They have a great staff, and I've talked to somebody who went there, and the one thing they did tell me is they have time to just have a period of mindfulness, and they also use an essential oil called lavender, which really helps you to calm down and relax and get some peace. The people who've been through Focus Marines Foundation have said that it really helped them, it really worked for them, helped restore their marriage. So a big shout out to the guys at Focus Marines Foundation, and especially Ted Kretschmar. He's a great guy, and he really he's great to talk to. I really enjoyed speaking with him. Okay, now today's show is going to be all about PTSD. Before I say anything else, I want to let you know that not every show I do is going to be heavy, overwhelming, or sad, okay? There's some stuff that I want to get accomplished, and my ministry is mainly about PTSD, but some of the shows are going to be a whole lot more lighthearted and not quite so heavy. And especially, I've got a couple people in mind that are funny as all get out, who I want to have as guests on the show. So be at peace and know that not all these shows are going to be heavy. Today's show is going to be a little on the heavy side, though, okay? And I wanted to start out with the difference between PTSD and PTS. And I just remembered I'm supposed to do something else. Sorry about that, guys. If anybody's listening and they are needing to go into St. Charles County via Highway 70 westbound from St. Louis County into St. Charles on Highway 70 westbound, and they're planning on going over the Blanchette Bridge. Yes, the Blanchette Bridge is having construction, but there was a really horrific accident there a couple of hours ago, and when we drove over about 11:30, 11:40, there was a medevac. They had all 4 lanes closed down, and there was a medevac taking a patient who's seriously injured, taking them out of there and flying them to a hospital. So, and traffic was backed up for miles. So if you are headed to St. Charles via Highway 70 westbound, please consider taking another route. And there is another route if you go further to 70 out into West County. So, and please be careful. My husband said that on his way here today, he saw 2 almost accidents. So people are driving kind of goofy. So y'all be careful and stay off your phones and pay attention to the road. All right? All right. Thank you. Little detour. Okay, the difference between PTSD and PTS. I had a person say to me, I'm not going to call it PTSD anymore because it's not a disorder. It's a normal reaction to a stressful event. So I'm just going to start calling it PTS. And, I always thought of that. And when I was preparing for the show, I thought, okay, let me see if there's a difference. And there actually is a difference between the two. Now, PTS, or post-traumatic stress, is a very normal and adaptive reaction to trauma. You'll have the same epinephrine release. You'll have the signs and symptoms of heart racing, shaking, sweating, your blood pressure's up. I know when I've been in emergency situations, a strange thing happened. My legs will quit shaking and my kneecaps just bounce up and down. Weirdest thing. But that's actually for me a key to know that, I'm really like over the top upset and I need to start taking action to calm myself down. But so you'll have all the symptoms of an epinephrine dump. Within a few days, or a few hours to a few days, you'll start to calm down, and within a few weeks, the symptoms will subside. You shouldn't be having those symptoms for no more than a month or 4 weeks. You may be left feeling extra cautious in the same situation in the future. My husband was in an accident at Cave Springs in Mexico, and he was super extra careful at that intersection after that. And he's a very careful driver anyway, but he avoided that intersection for a while, and then he was just extra careful. And that's normal. When you're in a difficult situation or a stressful situation, when you've had a traumatic event happen to you, it does make you be extra careful. And that's not always a bad thing. Okay, if you're going through this, if it's been 2 weeks and you're feeling very tense and very tight and very apprehensive and anxious, you may want to actually go, make an appointment to talk to somebody. There's a place called Give an Hour, and counselors can sign up to give an hour per week to a person who can't afford it. You can go to giveanhour.org, and they can plug you in if you can't afford some assistance. You can also talk to the YMCA. Sometimes they can set you up with counselors, and sometimes they have small group counseling there too. Okay, that's PTS. What's PTSD? All right, PTSD is actually considered a mental disorder because it is listed in a book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, which is considered the recognized authority on mental illness diagnoses. So if you're in that book, it's considered a mental illness. That doesn't mean that you're crazy or you're beyond help. Furthest thing from the truth. It just means it's classified different, and it's also classified different as far as insurance is concerned. If you have insurance, some insurances will cover a diagnosis where they won't cover the fact that you have post-traumatic stress and you're not dealing with it correctly. So if you have to write down a diagnosis for the insurance company, PTSD is considered I guess what you'd say is an insurable diagnosis. PTSD happens when you have seen a death or been involved in a serious accident or serious injury. Obviously, September 11th, 2001, being in a severe car accident, a plane crash, all the big things that you think of. But, and I was really amazed to find this out too, you can actually get post-traumatic stress disorder from being diagnosed with a critical or severe illness. PTSD tends to happen when you realize that your life is no longer safe. You had the idea, or maybe even the illusion, that your life was safe and that you were rocking and rolling and everything was good, and then bam, something comes along like 9/11 or a car accident or a fire, a home fire, and you realize something that was going on every day suddenly turned and you were no longer safe. Even if whether you were critically burned in a home fire or whether you got out in one piece, you could definitely end up with post-traumatic stress disorder. You can also have post-traumatic stress disorder if you had a close loved one, a spouse or a parent or a child diagnosed with a critical life-threatening illness. And we all know doctors who have great bedside manners and those who don't. And sometimes that can even contribute to it. If you had a doctor who is very harsh or hard-hearted with you, it makes the news all that much more brutal. Oddly, two people can be in the same situation, and one will end up with PTSD and the other one won't. And especially since 9/11. Psychologists, psychiatrists are trying to determine why. If there's two people who go to war, they're in the same combat or same battle, and one walks away with PTSD, the other one doesn't. Why? What happened? Was one more able to cope? Did one feel more in control? They don't know. They're coming up with some hypotheses, but they're not sure at this point as far as what I've read. PTSD also involves a lot of avoidance. You go through something and you'll say, "Oh, I'll never do that again." Well, with PTSD, that's magnified, such as if you've been in a car accident and you never ever want to go on that highway again. I had a friend who was in a really bad car accident on Friday the 13th, and I forgot what year or what month, but she, after that, she was so traumatized by the car accident, and it almost killed her. She was so traumatized by it that she would not get out of bed on Friday the 13th. And I remember there was one year where there was like 3 or 4 Friday the 13ths, and she called in every single Friday the 13th and said, "I'm not coming in." So we all knew that she wasn't going to, but that is an extreme case of avoidance. You have PTSD if you've gone weeks and even months and you're not able to stop being jittery. I know somebody who came back from Iraq, and they had quite a lot of combat. And months after they had gotten out of the military, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, they're still up walking around. They're not a bit tired. They're jumpy, but they weren't a bit tired. Finally, around dawn, they would fall asleep, and they'd sleep for a couple of hours. Needless to say, that puts your body into a non-recuperative state because you can't recuperate from the stress that you're constantly under. The main difference between PTSD and PTS, or post-traumatic stress disorder, and post-traumatic stress are 2 things: duration and intensity. If it goes past a month, it's most likely post-traumatic stress disorder. If the symptoms are not calming down, they're not dampening out, they're not fading, if they're still as strong as they were when it first happened, that's most likely post-traumatic stress disorder. You can't just get over it. When I was 10 years old, and this is kind of my first experience with the military, my grandparents and I had driven out to California in a pickup truck with a camper on top. Excuse me. We were driving home, and we were about 15 miles northeast of Albuquerque on Interstate 40, and a driver of a semi-truck fell asleep. That was back when the speed limit was 70-ish. It was in 1969, so 69, 70 time frame. And he had fallen asleep. He had come across the median. His cab had broken away from the truck part, and his cab had flipped several times, pinning him underneath all the debris. The truck part came and made like 100 long-foot plow in the grass in the median, and all the contents of the truck came flying out all over the highway. My grandpa was driving that morning. It happened about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was still in the camper. And like I said, I was 10 years old, and I noticed that my grandpa was just weaving all over the highway. What I didn't know is he was working really hard to avoid big silver boxes. And those big silver boxes were probably about half the size of a television. But they were boxes of ammunition on their way to being flown to Vietnam. There had been 2 other accidents just like that in that same long, straight, flat, boring stretch of highway. And in those previous accidents, everyone had been killed. my grandma had a whole church of people back home in Hannibal praying for her, and I really attribute those prayers and God to sparing her life. But my grandpa thought it would be interesting to take me and to walk up and see the scene of the accident because it was so far away from any city. We had to wait quite a while for an ambulance and tow trucks and everything to get there. There's glass all over the highway. There was debris all over the highway. Some of the boxes of ammunition had hit other vehicles, and nothing had gone off, which was an incredible blessing. But after that, after being in the accident, after going, and my grandfather basically, he's a little odd. We'll just leave it at that. He was a bit odd of a guy. After seeing the accident, and then finding out later that I was looking at the debris, knowing that a man was pinned underneath and he died, I actually got to fly back home, and I was sick to my stomach all the time, so my mom decided to take me to the doctor. And although I'm a whole lot older than 10 years old, I still remember the drive to the doctor. And we were going down a main road in our city, and there were side roads, and a car would come up to the stop sign, and it wasn't anything I could control. I would scream and just about jump in my mom's lap because I was sure that car was going to hit us. It wasn't anything I could just get over. It wasn't anything I had any control over whatsoever. It was a natural protective reaction that my body was doing after being in a trauma. Now, I don't remember how long that lasted, but I know to this day, all these years later, well, if somebody comes roaring up to a stop sign, and I'm on the main thoroughfare, I will still cover the brake with my foot. I will still go, okay, buddy. And it's something that stuck with me, but it's not something that it's not something that messes up my life. I still drive a lot, probably way too much, but that's a whole nother show. Okay, so that I would say was probably post-traumatic stress, what I was enduring. It wasn't anything I could control, but it was post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress disorder was if that stuck with me for months and years and maybe got worse, or maybe got a little bit better and maybe got worse. As a nurse, I remember working in the burn unit and seeing a 3-year-old boy who was burnt really bad when somebody had thrown a bomb through his apartment window. He was sitting watching TV with his mom, and after taking care of him and watching him cardiac arrest, helping work on him, and then seeing him die, I had nightmares so badly that I would jolt awake. And one night I jolted so hard when I woke up that I hit my head on the headboard of my bed, and after that I started having concussion type symptoms. That was a scary time. That was when I was in nursing school. That I always wondered if that could be closer to post-traumatic stress disorder, because it stayed with me a long time. And I still have things that I stay away from because of that little boy. Okay, so post-traumatic stress disorder. Self-medicating in an attempt to calm down. Alcohol is a big thing that people, especially soldiers or first responders who have PTSD, tend to want to self-medicate. You're so exhausted, you're so stressed, and you just want to sleep. And you get to the point where you think, well, if alcohol can help me sleep, then alcohol it is. And the cycle of alcohol and caffeine and energy drinks is a really tough one to get off of. And if you can never step onto that gerbil wheel, please don't. There's other things that you can do besides alcohol, and I encourage you, and I'm going to share a little bit about this. Things you can do, I'm going to share a little bit about that later. If you're having explosive or uncontrollable anger months or years after the event that gave you the post-traumatic stress disorder, that's definitely a PTSD instead of post-traumatic stress. If you're having thoughts of suicide, if you feel hopeless, like this thing has got you and you cannot get away from it, if you're having that, seek help. There's some PTSD hotlines that are available. I'm sure there's some for first responders. I know there's some for veterans. TAPS, TAPS, taps.com, and I think taps.org. They are incredible, and they will stay with you on the phone all night if they have to. Some apps, speaking of phone, some apps on your phone that can help with PTSD. I'm going to name a list. So if you're listening and you have something to write with, you might want to jot some of these down. Okay, phone apps for anxiety and PTSD. I've talked to people who have PTSD, and everybody says the best one is one called Calm, CALM, period. It's a free app. I think there's in-app purchases, but everybody I've talked to raves about Calm. There's another one called Headspace. There's another one called PTSD Coach and PTSD Family Coach, two separate ones. So far we have Calm, Headspace, PTSD Coach, and PTSD Family Coach. Another one is called PTSD Free. Another one is called What's Up. Another one is called T2 Mood Tracker. I've heard good things about that one. If you're into mindfulness, there's one called Mindfulness Coach. There's another app called Vet Change, and this one assists with cutting back on drinking. There's another app called Happify. Another one called Moving Forward, Worry Watch, and Pacifica, and the last one is called Brain FM. Brain FM was actually developed by neuroscientists. And like I said, the ones that I hear the most good about are Calm, PTSD Coach, and T2 Mood Tracker. You know, the thing is, not everything works for everybody. Don't be afraid to download 6 or 7 different apps and try them. You know, give them a couple of days, and one of them is going to fit your personality and your schedule and your life. So don't hesitate to download more than a few of them and just try. You know, some of them you're going to be like, I don't even understand how to use this. I'm that way with a lot of apps. But some of them are going to work for you. And if if it takes 2 or 3 apps or 10 or 12 apps to keep you together, go for it. You want to, looking for progress is a good thing too. It's not going to happen overnight. And if you want to kick PTSD's butt, which I bet you do, it's going to take some work on your part. And there's people who will back you up. There's people who are there to encourage you. So don't give up. Okay? All right. Now, my third section is something that I didn't plan on, and I ended up putting it together this morning. I was listening to somebody on another radio station. What? I am allowed to do that. It was on something called neurofeedback. Now, had I heard of it before? Maybe. I was more familiar with biofeedback. And when I was a nurse, back in the 1900s, we'll just leave it at that, I worked on a cardiac unit. And oh my gosh, I love cardiology. I still miss it to this day. It just... if somebody breaks their leg, I'm going to have to call 911 for them. But if somebody has a heart attack, I'm happy camper. I shouldn't say that, but it happens. Okay. And so when I worked in a cardiac unit, we had this cassette tape, which shows you how long ago it was. We had this little cassette tape that was on biofeedback. And we were all, as nurses, we were all supposed to listen to it. And I did what I do so well. My family knows this. I got 10 minutes into it and I fell asleep. So when they asked me if it worked, I said, yeah, it really helps you sleep. Some of the other nurses just laughed at it and thought it was silly. Most of the patients would listen to it once or maybe half of a time and hit the call button and say, we're done. This is so stupid and so boring. But things have changed since then. So if you're mature in age, give it a second chance. And biofeedback is a good thing, but neurofeedback is better. Now, they're two totally different things. I thought, I wonder if they're the same. So I looked it up. No, they're not. Biofeedback uses, like the little clips on the end of your fingers, and it uses sensors to measure and monitor respiratory rate, heart rate, blood pressure, skin moisture, skin temperature, muscle tension. Also, you can be aware of the fact that you're tense. With me, I've had a lot of problems with tension in the past. So my question is, what I ask myself is, where are my shoulders? Are they under my ears or are they down in a relaxed position? If you're starting to feel anxious, think of, where are your shoulders? Relax them. When you relax your shoulders, the rest of your body tends to relax a little bit more. Okay. So biofeedback is used as a feedback mechanism. You can find out where you are as far as, are you tense? Is your heart racing? Is your heart up? And many times it can detect changes before you feel the changes. And a little side note, that's one of the magical things about having a service dog, is they can see changes in you before you even realize that you're having them. And your dog can be trained to come up and, bark at you, tap you with his paw, slap you with his paw, or lick your face to make you realize, hey, you're starting into that pattern of where you're going, you're going off into anxiety, and they can bring you out of it or make you aware so you can bring yourself out of it. Okay, so that's a little side note on a service dog, just in case you didn't know. Neurofeedback is different, and I've heard about this for the first time last week, and I was sitting at the radio taking notes. Neurofeedback sounds incredible. It monitors the central nervous system only, and you get one of those cute little skull caps, and they put electrodes on your skull. They don't do anything to your brain. There's no shocking. There's only a monitoring. They put electrodes on your brain or on your skull with the little water-based paste to hold it in place. They don't have to shave anything. And they take brain wave measurements. It reads brain waves much like an EEG or electroencephalogram, but it has a different aim. It aims at helping you learn to modify your thought patterns of cortical activity in order to normalize brain activity and brain thoughts. This is also used, and you'll hear about it, neurofeedback, you'll hear it probably this year a lot when they talk about the Olympic athletes and the preparation that they go through. They also use these on fighter pilots. I didn't know that. And peak performance athletes, such as football players, and I think golfers are pretty into the neurofeedback too. Neurofeedback is done twice a week. Again, nothing is done to the brain. It's only a monitoring. And what it does is it reads brain waves. The amazing thing that I think is so cool is you can train the right and left brain separately. I mean, does anybody else find that absolutely amazing? That just thrills me to death. Okay. Anyway, the neurofeedback reads your brain waves. And if you have PTSD, you have your autonomic nervous system. There's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, and you have, now you may have heard that if you have PTSD, you have the gas on all the time. Well, they're finding through neurofeedback you don't. You have the gas and the brakes on at the same time, which is why someone may sit in a chair for hours and have major flashbacks. It's like, well, if you're having a major flashback, why don't you get up? Well, because your brakes are on, but your gas is on at the same time. Can you imagine what it would do to the engine of a car if you drove with the gas, the gas pedal depressed and the brakes on at the same time? That would absolutely stink. Okay, now in our brain, we have brain waves. Last week I talked about in the heart, we have 40 to 50,000 brain cells. In the brain, it's obviously all brain cells, and they have an electrical charge on them. That's why you can, for the heart, you can do an EKG, electrocardiogram, and the brain, you can do an EEG. What it does is it reads those electrical waves. Now, a little primer here. Alpha waves in your brain, those are when you're calm and you're meditating, you're relaxed, when you're praying, when you're listening to somebody you love, when you're listening to music you enjoy, you're emitting alpha waves. Beta waves. There's alpha, beta, gamma, and theta. Those are the ones that I'm going to talk about. Beta waves are broken down into multiple different types of waves. If you're focused, if you're on fire, if you're getting stuff done, you're cranking out beta waves. Beta 1 and beta 2 are very focused. But if you get off into beta 5, that's when you start catastrophizing things. Oh my gosh. You know what? If we go out, and I remember watching Third Watch, and Faith, one of the characters on Third Watch, her daughter had gotten into some drugs with a guy. And in the show, Faith says, she's talking to the psychologist, and she's like, this is what's going to happen. She's going to go back to the guy. They're going to do drugs. She's going to start selling. She's going to do this. She's going to do that. She's going to do that. And she had basically the next 30 years of her daughter's life planned out. That is catastrophizing. I hate to say it. I used to do it. God really has healed me of it. And it's a major freedom when you get loose from this. Everything becomes when you're catastrophizing, everything goes wrong. Everything, when you think about what's going to happen, you see everything just going off a cliff. You're going to have a party, but what if somebody falls? I used to have parties and think, okay, I need to refresh my CPR skills in case somebody cardiac arrests. That's catastrophizing, and it sucks to live in that kind of bondage, believe me. And if you struggle with that, God can heal you. Gamma waves in the brain. These are associated with dementia. Theta waves on the frontal lobe, the front of the brain, left frontal lobe. Theta waves have to do with not processing information. This is also seen in ADHD. You can tell somebody when they're in the theta phase, you can tell somebody something, and if they have ADHD, they cannot get a hold of that information and process it. Okay, so in neurofeedback, they put electrodes on your head, and they measure your brain waves. Now, for somebody with PTSD, they are going to have real strong brain waves in the I'm not explaining this right. Within the autonomic nervous system, the gas is on. The gas pedal is depressed. what neurofeedback does is you have a screen in front of you, and when you find the right brain waves, you'll have a little car, and you'll be able to move that car forward. It's not anything evil or wrong or anything like that. It's just sheerly done with the energy from brain waves. And it's on a screen which is attached to the electrodes. When you get stressed because the car's not moving, the car still won't continue to move because of the stress you're feeling. When you start relaxing and getting into those alpha waves that are calmer, then that car will start to move. And the longer you stay in those alpha waves and the calmer you stay, the more the car moves. And I was listening to the lady who was being interviewed, and she said at first the car would start and stop and start and stop until she learned to kind of access those alpha waves, and then the car on the screen would move forward continually. And one of the things that's neat that they say about neurofeedback is once you've taught your brain to step over, so to speak, into those alpha waves, then the brain is happy staying there. And in nursing school, we always heard that the body constantly looks for homeostasis or the balanced place. And so the brain is constantly looking for a balanced place. And it's happy when it gets there, and it wants to stay there. And that's how neurofeedback can help PTSD, is you find how to access that balanced place in your mind, and then your brain is wanting to stay there. But when you get out of there, you can feel it right away, and then you learn how to bring yourself back into that calmer state. Now, it's not like you're so laid back you can't get out of the lounge chair or anything. It's you come back into a normal parameter state. After you've had they said about 10 appointments, and for some people who are really bad, they may take up to 30 appointments. Most people see progress within the first 5 appointments. But after that, you may need a annual update, or every couple of months update, where you just kind of go back, make sure you're doing it right, make sure you're getting into that, I hate to say that happy place, but that's, since I don't have charts and graphs in front of me, that's the best way to say it over the radio. One of the amazing things is, everybody in St. Louis heard about the duck boats in Branson, and how that lady lost 7 members of her family, her husband and several of her children, and her parents too. I remember so many people saying, how do you even deal with that? How can you ever just make peace with that? Well, possibly neurofeedback, if she hasn't already had it, could help her. Because one of the great things about neurofeedback is if you have extremely bad PTSD and you know that you need to go through counseling, you can do the neurofeedback first and then go through counseling. And what it does is it balances your brain out, helps you think and be in that normal parameters, happy place. And then you go to counseling. So when you start getting stressed, you can bring yourself back into that place. So it's kind of a blunting of the anguish that you may go through as you're going through counseling. And it helps. And what it does is it eliminates the need for alcohol, but it also eliminates, or at least reduces, the need for medication. So we have taken up almost an hour. All right. One of the last things I want to share with you is the place. There is a place in St. Louis that does this neurofeedback, and it is called the Integrative Mind Institute. And it's all one word, Integrative Mind Institute, and it's at www.integrativemindinstitute.com. The lady who was speaking was one of the employees, and she said that they have a pretty extensive waiting line, and to be patient. They're trying to get in as many people as possible. She also mentioned a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I've actually ordered that book, and it's 500 pages, so I ordered the condensed version, but give me a little while to read that, and then I will do a book report for you. Okay, how about that? Neurofeedback is also great after a stroke, or if you're a soldier who's, or a first responder who's been diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. Neurofeedback can help you develop and access places in your mind. So if you have PTSD, if you've had a stroke, or if you have traumatic brain injury, neurofeedback can work well for you. Some of the VAs are now using neurofeedback. And your first neurofeedback appointment, they will hook you up to the electrodes. They don't do anything to your brain. They're taking readings, and they'll have you do 5 minutes with your eyes open, 5 minutes with your eyes closed, and then they'll have you do a task. They call it a cognitive task, but stacking blocks, something probably that has to do with fine motor skills. They'll have you do a cognitive task. It could be just, saying the alphabet backwards. I always thought, gosh, I hope nobody ever asked me to do that, because there's no way I could do it. Unless I wrote it down, but that would be cheating, I guess. And the lady who was talking on the radio program said, why are we not doing neurofeedback for every soldier who comes back from combat? I think that's a great idea. I know quite a few soldiers who they had the test when they came back to see if they had PTSD or if they had anxiety issues, and they wanted to protect their rank, and so they lied. And all of them happily admitted that they lied, and they didn't want to, risk getting busted down in rank. And if everyone had to go through neurofeedback, lying wouldn't be an issue. It would level the playing field. Same thing with first responders. I know in the town that I went to nursing school in, the first responders, when they went and had a bad traumatic accident or fire that they went through, they would have a counselor come out to the firehouse and spend time with them and talk to them and make sure that people were, dealing with things. As a nurse, it was, you went through, I remember doing CPR on somebody, and I've gotten to know their family and their kids and their grandkids and their aunts and their uncles, because everybody had visited. And doing CPR on them, and they pass, and you do terminal care, and then you're like, I'm gonna go have a good cry, and you're like, nope, sorry, the guy in 24 wants the bedpan, and so there goes your good cry, and that puts you in a position where you have to deal with stuff at home, which that's no fun either, especially for your family. So neurofeedback is an option for a lot of people, and don't feel embarrassed or ashamed like you've failed or like you're not strong enough. Brains are so much more than our own will. Brains have to do with chemistry and what we're eating and our genetics and our DNA and how we were raised and how much stress we saw and how much stress we're dealing with aside from the stress that we're going through at the firehouse, at the police station, or at the hospital, or at the hospice for that matter. So, I encourage you to give yourself a chance, give your life a chance. There are so many new avenues of healing for PTSD that, you can do some research and you can start taking advantage of things. And one of the things I want to do on this show is show you that there's options out there. And especially if you're a combat veteran, I have a list called the Collection of Veterans Internet Support Sites, which is over 6,000 organizations that I've collected that are there to help. And if you ever go through a period where you don't feel like anybody cares or you don't feel like anybody is aware, there's at least 6,000 that care and are very, very aware of what you're going through and are prepared to help. Out of those 6,000, especially as the wars are winding down now, a lot of those 6,000 are welcoming first responders. And because they see that you have a huge need too, and they want to be able to, they've learned what works, and they want to be able to fulfill that need. So that is all we have time for today. I thank you everybody for listening. And again, if Ferguson Fire Department on West Florissant is listening, hey, shout out to you guys. Again, thank you for taking my flyer. And like I said, I thank you. Father God, if anybody out there is struggling with PTSD, I pray that they find the help that they need. There's so much help out there, Lord. Help them to access it. Help them to get in contact with me. I can help. I can put them in touch with other people who can help them. Lord, help them not to feel alone. Help them to feel like there's a lot of people rallying around them. There's a lot of people who love them. There's a lot of people who care. In your name I pray. Thank you, Lord. All right. Again, thank you for listening. This has been Help, Hope, and Healing with Kim Milberg. And you are not here by accident.